Hey guys, welcome to Mr. Gregoire's first attempt at YouTube. And you guys get to be the first ones to see it, so you're very lucky. I think we're going to break the internet. So here's how this is going to work. I'm going to try to post you guys a video every day, reviewing whatever we would have normally covered in class. Don't forget that you guys also have assignments, though, that are due on the Microsoft Teams website. Those short answer questions at the end of the week that review whatever was covered that week. But you guys also need to be logging on to the College Board website and doing those practice multiple choice, because that's for a grade 2. Just so you guys know, I do have your email addresses that you guys signed up on that website with, but I don't have your passwords. So if for some reason you're having trouble getting on, I can get you your email address that you signed up with, which is your login. And then you guys can hit that like forget password button, and they'll send you an email so that you guys can reset your password and get logged in. But you guys got to get on top of that, because I think only 6 people completed that last week, and I need to update your grades so that you guys can get course credit and all that stuff. So you guys got to be keeping up on your work, okay? We are going to be starting in this packet. I know it's backwards on your screen. We're going to be in the Unit 8 Part 2 packet. That's the one labeled The Great War or World War I. So this is where we're going to be starting. So if you guys want to get that in front of you while I'm giving you guys some information, you should be taking notes. If I'm going too fast at any point, just pause the video and you guys can get yourself caught up. A couple other quick things just so you guys are aware of. There are some potential changes to the AP exam. I know some of you guys are worried about that and the idea that that's coming up in early May. As of right now, we know that the AP exam is going to be pushed back at least until late May. But there are some other potential changes too for how the test is administered. We don't have a lot of specific answers, so stay tuned. As soon as I know anything, I will let you guys know, but do recognize that the test will not take place as scheduled on May 8th. It's going to be at least pushed back maybe 2.5 weeks. And that's as of right now. And as you guys know, a lot of things are kind of changing day to day. So we'll kind of figure it out as we go. All right. Just looking at my notes, seeing if there's anything else I needed to tell you guys about. I think that's it. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get going. The way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to post these on YouTube, my name first, Mr. Gregoire. And then I will read off or title it by the name of the packet. So it'll be Mr. Gregoire, APUSH, right? AP US History, APUSH, Unit 8, Part 2, the Great War, Day 1. All right, and then tomorrow will be Day 2, and so on and so forth. But I'll post the link on the Teams website too, so you guys can find it. Let's go ahead and get started, because I'm rambling and I'm already like 3 minutes in. So you guys are in this packet. What I want you to do real quick is I want you guys to turn to this first page here. This is actually a little bit of a review of where we left off in the Part 1 packet, which a review video is going to be coming for that too. But what I want you guys to do right now is I want you to read through this document. So you're going to pause the video, give you guys a chance to kind of read through this. And then once you have read through and annotated it, you can go ahead and unpause it, and then we'll jump right in. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video now. Okay, guys, welcome back. So what you guys were looking at here, you need to remember that Woodrow Wilson becomes president in 1912, all right? And this was that whole controversial election, because this is where Teddy Roosevelt decides to run again, but this time he's going to run under what's known as the Bull Moose Party. So it's Teddy Roosevelt, Taft, and Woodrow Wilson kind of all going head to head. And because Taft and Roosevelt are sort of pulling from the same group of supporters, they ultimately end up splitting the votes. And they both end up losing, and Woodrow Wilson becomes the president. And when Woodrow Wilson becomes president in 1912, he's talking about this new idea of moral diplomacy, that it's the United States' responsibility to be promoting ideas like freedom and equality to the rest of the world. Now, you guys will notice on here as you are reading that it wasn't really necessarily to the rest of the world. His focus was specifically on Latin America, so U.S. intervention in Latin America. And that was true of Roosevelt's big stick diplomacy and Taft's dollar diplomacy. They all tended to focus on Latin America, which is kind of important. Because if you guys turn to the next page, over in Europe, and this is probably going to look really familiar to you guys because you're going to remember it from global studies, but let's go ahead and run through this real quick. Over in Europe, you guys know that tension is starting to boil, and it's been starting to boil since the late 1800s. But as tension always does, it builds and builds and builds until there's a breaking point. All right, and if you guys remember for World War I, there was that acronym MAIN. There it is. From global studies that you guys can use just as a quick review. So remember, the M stood for militarism, right? We know that countries in Europe and Western nations, including the United States, have gone through the process of industrialization. And as they've industrialized, their militaries have become more and more and more powerful. This is creating tension in Europe. European countries are competing against each other to see who can build up the biggest and baddest and most industrialized military. And that's creating competition between countries. And that competition is becoming tense, and countries are becoming suspicious of each other as they build up their militaries. So it's creating that tension. The A in MAIN is alliances. Remember, this is the big one. Countries believe that by forming alliances, they're protecting themselves from war, which in a sense is the exact opposite of what happens. You guys know that with alliances, when you form these alliances and you agree to back each other up or protect each other in times of war, the more countries you form alliances with, the more likely it is you're going to end up being pulled into a conflict. So these alliance systems are forming throughout Europe at this time, and these alliances will kick in as World War I hits. Okay, so A is for alliances. The I is for imperialism. All right, we just covered American imperialism in the last packet, but you guys know that European countries had been imperializing since early in the 1800s. And when European countries compete to see who can gain the most territory and access to the most raw materials, that will also create tension, because it's not just who's the biggest and baddest at imperializing, it's also creating tension when different countries are going to compete over the same piece of land. All right, and when we know when countries want the same piece of land, oftentimes they'll end up in conflict with each other and violence might break out. And finally, the N is nationalism. Extreme pride in your country. During this time period, European countries believe that each of them is the best, and the goal is to try to prove that. You know, who is the big alpha dog in Europe at this time? And nationalism also causes the tension to build. So you guys have Maine there, and that's again more of a global studies topic. Just so you guys know, this is not like crucial for the US AP exam. This is more like background and again contextualization stuff that you guys can use, because on the AP exam what it's going to focus on is US actions in the war. What are the things that we do going into World War I to help us win the war, and our actions involving the war. So this isn't involving us. This is over in Europe. Okay, and that includes this last piece at the bottom too, the spark. And you guys remember that, the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand from Austria-Hungary. He goes to Serbia, the capital of a city of Sarajevo. He's assassinated there with his wife by a Serbian nationalist. About a month later, Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia. What would have probably been a very small conflict between Austria-Hungary and Serbia turns into this global conflict, as each one of them has multiple alliances with other powerful countries in Europe. And this ultimately becomes this huge conflict that you guys know. Okay, so if you guys need to, you should pause the video now, check over your notes, read through it. If you need any more information, you can go ahead and look that up online. Again, you guys are going to be responsible for doing some research on these. The video that I'm doing now and we'll be doing every day will help you guys, but you're going to need to do some of this on your own too. Okay, so once you're ready, turn to the next page. Okay, and right here. So this is a little bit of contextualization as well, because again, if our focus is on World War I and U.S. involvement in World War I, this is leading up to it, okay? The first one, American foreign policy at the start of World War I. We just got done talking about the Spanish-American War and how the United States, for the first time, is sort of asserting itself as a global power. Remember, previously, from Washington's farewell address to the Monroe Doctrine, we had said, stay neutral, avoid foreign entanglements, avoid foreign alliances, those types of things. The Spanish-American War is a huge turning point for us because it's the first time that we sort of didn't mind our own business. We're going to fight in a conflict off American soil, right? It was in Cuba, against Spain, a foreign power, right, from Europe. And that's a real turning point for us because that's not something we had done before, fighting in a foreign conflict in another land against a European power. We just hadn't done that. So American foreign policy as World War I starts getting kicked off is in that early 1900s, we had sort of asserted ourselves. Remember, the Roosevelt corollary says we are the international police power. So we had really been puffing out our chests early in the 1900s saying, look at us, world, we've arrived. And then down here you have this but. World War I is going to start in 1914. And when World War I starts in 1914, after, the last 16 years of saying, here we are, we're an international police power, we're going to monitor these, World War I starts, and we're like, whoa, never mind. At the start of World War I, we're going to declare ourselves to be neutral. So in a sense, we revert back to our old foreign policy where we're going to be like, never mind, farewell address, avoid foreign entanglements, avoid European affairs. So it's interesting how, again, in the early 1900s, we're becoming an imperialist power, and Roosevelt corollary says we're an international police force. And then all of a sudden with the but, once the war starts, it's like, never mind, we didn't mean it. Okay. Now, we declare ourselves to be neutral. What I want you guys to do next, though, a series of events are going to take place that's going to pull us into this conflict. And what I actually need you guys to do is turn here, and I need you guys to read through this. So again, you're going to pause the video here and take a minute or two just to kind of read through this and see if this sounds familiar to you guys. Okay? So jump over to this, pause the video now. Okay. If you read through it, I'm hoping that this sounds familiar because over on the last page, the sinking of the Lusitania. Remember the Lusitania, I think this will probably sound familiar from Global 2. The Lusitania was a British cruise ship that had docked in New York City. And this is May 7th, 1915, if you want to write that in, May 7th, 1915. The parts that you guys just read here, in particular this one, this was taken out in a New York City newspaper. It was an advertisement, a New York City newspaper, taken out, and you'll see here, by the Imperial German Embassy. Germany had warned us ahead of time. They basically said if there is a cruise ship, a merchant ship, any type of ship for a country that they're currently at war with, they reserve the right to take that ship down. So they're looking at the Lusitania sitting here in a New York City harbor, being loaded up with passengers, including Americans. And they're basically taking this ad out saying, hey guys, don't do this because we reserve the right to blow this ship up if it comes over into European waters. And that's exactly what happens. On May 7th, 1915, a German U-boat is going to sink the British cruise ship Lusitania as it sort of gets into the English Channel, the area between Ireland and England. And 128 Americans will die. I might want to put that in there, right? 128 Americans die. The ship sinks almost immediately. It took 18 minutes from the moment the torpedo hit the side of the boat till when it actually sank. Now, this is a really big deal because, of course, the American government will come out and say, we're a neutral country. You can't be shooting at us. This takes away, and you're going to want to write this down, this takes away our freedom of the seas. Freedom of the seas is a phrase that comes out during this time, that the ocean is not owned by any country, so ultimately it is free for all countries to travel on it at any time. You can't take that away. That's sort of the argument of the American government and Woodrow Wilson. Now, a lot of Americans in 1915, as this happens, will call for war. We got to declare war on Germany. But Woodrow Wilson's going to say, no, it's not the time. But just so you guys know, Americans are starting to feel more and more attached to this conflict now. An anti-German sentiment is starting. A pro-British sentiment is starting at this time. But Woodrow Wilson is trying to hold back. And just so you know, Germany does respond. They come out and they immediately issue an apology. We didn't mean to kill these Americans on board the Lusitania. That wasn't our purpose. They would actually say that there was missiles or ammunition on the bottom of the Lusitania, and as it was traveling across the ocean, it was actually supplying Great Britain with weapons to use against the Germans. We said that that wasn't true. It turns out years later that's absolutely what was happening. We were hiding ammunition on the bottom of a cruise ship, hoping that the Germans wouldn't find out. But regardless of all that, Germany issues an apology. They say, we're sorry, we shouldn't have done that. Freedom of the seas, you're absolutely right. And then a month later, they come out and issue another statement where they basically are like, psych. Because they said, never mind. We're going to declare what's known as unrestricted submarine warfare. That's our new policy, unrestricted submarine warfare. There are no rules for how we use our submarines. We will blow up anything and everything that we want to. So, of course, that's going to anger Americans even more. Wait a minute, you apologized to us, and now you're issuing this new statement. So tension is building, but the United States is remaining neutral, and that's important to remember. Okay? What I want you guys to do at this point, tension's building, is I want you guys to go to the next page. So we already read this one. Go to this next page right here. Okay, and I want you guys to read this one. This one's known as the Zimmerman Telegram. You're going to take some little notes down here underneath, but I want you guys to take a minute and read through the Zimmerman Telegram. See if this sounds familiar. If it doesn't, see if you can kind of figure out what's going on here. Okay, so again, pause the video now. Okay, all set? All right, so you guys read through what is known as the Zimmerman Telegram. Zimmerman Telegram, it's discovered, let's say, in January of 1917. So we're fast forwarding a little bit now. We're in January of 1917, and this telegram is given to us by Western Union Telegram Service. It is a British-based company. So I want you to keep that in the back of your head as we're talking about this. Okay, so this is a British-based company that says to the American government, you're going to want to see this. We have intercepted a telegram. And the telegram is from the German government and was meant for Mexico. Okay, so think about that for a second. From Germany to Mexico, Britain says, we've intercepted this. It was a secret telegram, but we found it. We thought you were going to want to see it. And what the telegram basically said is the German government offering an alliance with Mexico, a secret alliance, where they basically tell Mexico, here's how our alliance is going to work. You're going to start a war with the United States. And that will preoccupy the United States so that Germany can win the war in Europe. And then Germany's promise to Mexico was, if you can preoccupy the United States and keep them busy so that we can win the war in Europe, as soon as the war is over with, we'll travel over to you, and Germany will join Mexico in fighting the United States, we'll defeat the United States, and then we will get back for you all of the land that you lost in the Mexican-American War. So you guys remember that from the 1840s, the whole Mexican cession. Mexico is basically saying, if you preoccupy the U.S. so we can win World War I, we'll get the Mexican cession back from Mexico. All right, so that's what the telegram says. So, of course, the United States is outraged again. And Britain's like, see, we told you that they're the bad guys. You got to join us. Now, again, think about this. Western Union, British-based company. Is there the possibility that this telegram was never sent from Germany to Mexico, that this was something that was designed by the British government to pull the United States into World War I, right? Conspiracy theories. I'm not real into them, but when you look at this idea, well, it's not crazy, right? And this was the tipping point that the United States needed because it is seen as an act of war, okay, trying to form an alliance, trying to get another country to attack us. So Congress declares war on Germany and enters World War I in April of 1917. So just a couple months later, the United States is now involved in World War I. Okay, now we're starting to get like 20 minutes in. if you guys go to the next page of your notes, so this is where I'm going to finish here. I'm just going to hit these real quick, and then we'll stop the video here, and you guys can kind of post and tell me how you felt about this and whether or not it helped. But just so you guys know, this is really where your information for World War I that you need to know for the AP exam, it starts here. Because what they're going to ask you on the AP exam is not, what were the causes of World War I, or what was the spark that started war? Because that's global history, that's world history, that's European history. Our history in World War I starts here, when we drop our neutrality, enter the war after the Zimmerman telegram, and now what are the U.S. actions that were taken during the war? Okay, what are the actions that take place here at home to help the United States and the Allies defeat Germany and the Central Powers? Okay, these are some of those actions. So these are the types of things that they might ask about in the AP exam. All right, so let's just run through these real quick. The first one is the Selective Service Act. Guys, for the second time in U.S. history, second time only, the United States will issue the draft, right? You guys remember from the Civil War, we had the Conscription Act, and that was the first time in U.S. history where people could be drafted into the military. Well, this is the second time, and it's called the Selective Service Act. And just so you guys know, they fixed it from the Civil War. Remember that whole deal where you could buy your way out of the draft? Not the case anymore. The Selective Service Act basically says anyone between the ages of 18 and 25 needs to register with the Selective Service, basically register with the government. You must register within 30 days of your 18th birthday, and then your name would be put into the draft. And 24 million men registered for the draft under the Selective Service Act. Again, no payment out, meaning the Civil War, you could buy your way out of the draft. That does not exist anymore. So 24 million men register for the draft. You can't get out of it. If your name is pulled, you're in. And 2.8 million men were drafted into the military under the Selective Service Act. The draft wasn't needed right away. There were enough volunteers, and there was American military was built up enough where we didn't need the soldiers right away, but pretty quickly the Selective Service Act goes into place. And again, 2.8 million would be brought in. The next one that I want you guys to look at, this Committee on Public Information. I actually want you to pause the video here, and I want you guys to type this into Google, and I want you guys to look at some of the images for this. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you to pause this now. Okay, if you had a chance to look this up, what you guys should have noticed is propaganda. The Committee on Public Information, think about that phrase, the committee, so it's a group that creates the public information that the government wants Americans to see at this time. Guys, it's a propaganda campaign, right? The American government wants the American people to support their military efforts. That's the public information they want them to have. So the Committee on Public Information is the group that created all the propaganda posters that were anti-German, all the posters like Uncle Sam right on the front of your page, one of the most famous propaganda posters ever in U.S. history, right? I want you for the U.S. Army. Also created by the Committee on Public Information. The goal of the Committee on Public Information was to try to obviously promote nationalism and patriotism, because that's what propaganda does. But the other goal was to make Americans feel that even if they weren't actively involved in the war as like a soldier or something like that, that every American had a role in this conflict. Right? World War I is a total war. It's going to be the responsibility of the American people to support the war effort in any way that they can. So you guys probably know some of these phrases like rationing, right? Don't eat all this food. Don't use all these materials because our soldiers are going to need them. And it's your responsibility at home to limit your use of these things. Liberty bonds and war bonds, which we're going to talk about in a second, right? It's your responsibility to invest and to loan money to your government because your government needs you right now, and it needs your money to support the soldiers. So Committee on Public Information is the group that pushed these ideas to the American people. The War Industries Board, that's the next one. Another organization created by the U.S. government. War Industries Board, they coordinated the production of war materials. So during a time of war like this, it wouldn't be uncommon for the U.S. government to essentially seize control of a privately owned factory and coordinate the production within that factory to supply their troops overseas. The example that I use is not like a real example necessarily, but let's say that there is a factory that makes tin cans for, like, food, beans and tuna fish and stuff like that. Well, the American government might come in and say, hey, we're seizing control of this factory. You are no longer making tin cans. You are making bullet casings because our soldiers need bullets, and your machines can be easily modified to make materials that can be useful for war. Okay, the War Industries Board would be the part of the government that coordinates the control of industry and factories to try to make sure that soldiers have everything that they need. One thing that I will remind you guys, remember in the late 1800s, we were still talking about laissez-faire. The government's not involved in the economy. Well, the War Industries Board, guys, is the exact opposite of that, right? The War Industries Board is, we are totally hands-on. In fact, we are seizing control of privately owned factories, and we are forcing production on them. So you might think, like, that's un-American, is that unconstitutional? Remember, during times of war, that whole phrase, necessary and proper. During a time of crisis, the U.S. government has the responsibility to do what it has to do for the benefit of the American people. If you're wondering right here, like, oh, are Americans going to be outraged by the War Industries Board? The answer is no, because it was during World War I. We had to win this conflict. Okay, and finally, your last one for the day, guys. Liberty bonds. Okay, Liberty bonds. You guys know that war is expensive. So what the U.S. government did in order to have enough money to fund the war is they basically called on Americans to loan the government money. So what they would basically say is, hey, we're selling Liberty bonds, and you can buy a Liberty bond for $50, right? That $50 would go to the American government to fund the war effort. But what the government would basically say is, we will pay you back with interest. So it's kind of like how a bank works, right? A bank loans me money, and I have to pay the bank back, but I pay it back with interest. It's sort of the same exact idea, except it's the opposite direction. Now, private citizens are now loaning money to the government, in this case, to fund the war effort. And then you have this bond, this piece of paper, this contract, and that bond, after the war is over with and we win and the economy goes, you're going to get paid back that money. And as a patriotic American, you did your duty of loaning money to the government so that we could win the war. And again, you would get paid back. Just in case you're wondering, like, oh, do Americans get rich off of this in interest payments? The interest was super, super low. So the rate was below market value, if that makes any sense. Americans didn't do it to get rich. Americans did it because they felt like it was them being good citizens and doing what they should do to help the war effort. Guys, that's my first YouTube video. That was a lot of work. So we're 28 minutes in. That's a long video. I hope that this uploads and works for us here. And if it does, I want you guys to post and let me know whether or not it worked for you. And then if this is something that you guys think helps and will benefit, we'll definitely keep doing it, because you guys know that I'm here to help you guys out any way that I can. Please email me or create a chat with me on Teams if you guys need anything. And other than that, I'm hoping to be posting videos daily for you guys as long as this works out well. Okay? Take care of yourselves. I hope you guys and your families are doing well. I know it's crazy times right now, but we're going to stick together. And again, don't worry about that AP exam. We're just going to keep working, keep doing what we can do to get ready. And I will give you guys all the information you need on that coming up. All right. So like I said, take care of yourselves, and you guys will hopefully see my face again tomorrow on your next video.